So before we plug in, let's talk about what's human and what's not.
And I'm Nikita Singh, not Grok, your host on Check It Out, only on WION World is One.
Vielleicht nur als Imposant.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching WION World is One. I'm Jyotsna Kumar and this is World DNA. Let's begin with the headlines. UN nuclear watchdog chief Rafael Grossi warns Iran likely will be able to begin producing enriched uranium in a matter of months despite damage to several nuclear facilities from US and Israeli attacks. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio urges Iran to ensure the safety and provide security to the International Atomic Energy Agency personnel, says calls in Tehran for the arrest and execution of IAEA's Director General Grossi unacceptable and should be condemned. U.S. President Donald Trump says his country was not going to stand for the continued prosecution of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on corruption charges, calls him a war hero, lauds him for the fabulous job working with U.S. to bring success in getting rid of nuclear threat in Iran. Israeli drone and missile strikes across Gaza Strip kills 81 people, including children. Gaza Civil Defense Agency confirms toll. India blasts Pakistan for attempting to blame it for a suicide attack in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Waziristan that killed 16 security personnel, says it has seen Pak Army statement and rejects it with the contempt it deserves. Clashes erupt between police and protesters in Belgrade following a rally that drew tens of thousands calling for the populist government to hold early elections with dozens arrested. Hundreds marched through Venice, condemning Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' wedding to journalist Lauren Sanchez, a lavish affair that has drawn backlash in the historic Italian city. Streets in the French capital come alive with color, music as thousands gather for the 2025 Pride March. Now, following the 12-day war against Iran, Israel is again redirecting its firepower on Gaza. The Gaza Civil Defense Agency on Saturday announced that at least 81 people were killed in the last 24 hours of Israeli airstrikes on the territory, including children. The ministry said that since the outbreak of the conflict between Hamas and Israel, On October 7, 2023, the Palestinian death toll in the war-torn Gaza Strip has risen to 56,412, with 133,054 others being injured. As per an UNRWA report released on Friday, the health response in the Gaza Strip has severely been hampered due to damaged facilities, movement restrictions, and limited access to medical supplies and fuel. The report further read that nearly half of the essential medical supplies were currently out of stock, and over 1/5 are projected to run out within the next 2 months. The report, citing United Nations, said that more than 684,000 people have been displaced yet again since the breakdown of the ceasefire agreement in March. Meanwhile, Israel's defense forces have stated that veteran Hamas operative who helped plan October 7 attack was killed in Gaza City strike. IDF claimed that Hakim al-Issa helped found Operations Division of Palestinian terror group's military wing. He served in various key positions and was a central source of knowledge. On the other side, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that the United States was not going to stand for the continued prosecution of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on corruption charges. Trump wrote a long post on his Truth Social account after an Israeli court rejected Netanyahu's request to postpone giving testimony in his corruption trial. He termed the case against Netanyahu as a witch hunt. Netanyahu has previously denied any wrongdoing and thanked Trump for his support in Israel's war with Iran, which saw a ceasefire agreement earlier this week. Now, back in Tel Aviv, the relatives of Gaza hostages and supporters have resumed their weekly rallies at Hostages Square, first time in 3 weeks. Directly addressing Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, the protesters called for a deal to secure the return of all the hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip, saying that both leaders were supposed to make a brave decision similar to the one they took on Iran, which ends the fighting in Gaza and brings back everyone.
It is time to act, not take.
Now, amid the uncertainty over the fate of Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi has said that Iran will be able to produce enriched uranium in a matter of months. During an interview with CBS News, Grossi also said that despite damage to Iranian nuclear facilities, some is still standing. On the question of whether Iran was able to relocate some or all of its enriched uranium before the strikes, Grossi admitted that there was no clarity at this point, but he did not rule out the possibility of Iran having moved some of the uranium stockpile. However, U.S. President Donald Trump disagreed with Grossi's assessment. In an interview with Fox News, Trump said he did not think the stockpile had been moved, as the U.S. did not give much notice to Iran before striking its nuclear facilities. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio condemned calls in Iran for the arrest and execution of Grossi. In a post on X, Rubio expressed support for IAEA's verification and monitoring efforts in Iran and called on Tehran to provide for the safety and security of IAEA personnel. Earlier, Iran had rejected a request by the IAEA to visit its nuclear facilities bombed by the U.S. and Israel. In a post on X, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had called the IAEA's request meaningless and malign in intent. Araghchi hit out at the IAEA chief Rafael Grossi personally for not speaking out against the Israeli and U.S. strikes, describing it as an astounding betrayal of his duties. Now, in the heart of Tehran, Iranians have united in mourning. They are standing together in grief and fury as they pay their last respects to senior IRGC commanders and nuclear scientists that were killed in the 12-day war with Israel. Here's a report.
We are here to show the enemy that we are all united and we will not abandon this country, and none of us will leave our country in a lurch.
The main message here is revenge. We want revenge for our martyrs' blood. Trump is only after his personal interests, and on the other hand, the destruction of Iran. For him, the presence of a power in the region is considered a complete threat, so he does everything he can to weaken us.
Now, from tactical eyes in the sky to lethal kamikaze strikes, drones have redefined warfare in Ukraine. The battlefield is no longer just about boots and bombs. Drone attacks account for about 70% of deaths in Russia and Ukraine. Now, here's how drone warfare is rewriting military playbooks in the Russia-Ukraine war. Our next report tells you more.
In the skies over Ukraine, war is no longer fought by just fighter jets. Long-range drone strikes have been a hallmark of the war in its fourth year. Russian drones have struck the southern Ukrainian port city of Odessa. The drone attack left a 21-story building in flames, causing damage to 3 floors and trapping residents. Outgunned, outspent and outmanned, Ukraine's mass drone deployment is marking a significant escalation in the war. Ukrainian forces have conducted a bold drone strike deep inside Russian territory, targeting the Marinovka airbase in the Volgograd region. The operation, led by Ukraine's Special Operations Forces, have reportedly destroyed 2 Russian Su-34 fighter bombers and damaged 2 others, while igniting a fire in the base's critical technical maintenance facilities. The strike not only underscores Ukraine's growing capability to project power far beyond its borders, but also exposes potential vulnerabilities in Russia's air-based defenses, raising questions about the resilience of its military infrastructure. The Sukhoi Su-34 is a twin-engine, 2-seat fighter bomber designed to deliver precision strikes in contested environments. Its ability to loiter over the battlefield and deliver heavy payloads has made it a cornerstone of Russia's air campaign in Ukraine. They are actively used by Russian forces along the front line for bombing missions, including the deployment of guided aerial bombs. The Marinovka Air Base, located roughly 322 km from the Ukrainian border, serves as a key hub for such activities, housing not only aircraft but also the technical infrastructure needed to keep them operational. The aerial assault is a stark reminder of Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb 4 weeks ago, when more than 100 Ukrainian drones struck air bases deep inside Russia, targeting nuclear-capable long-range bombers. The race between Russia and Ukraine to develop increasingly sophisticated and deadlier drones is turning the war into a testing ground for new weaponry. It remains to be seen how far can both sides go to prove their dominance. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Well, let's get you some updates from the Russia-Ukraine war. At least 2 people were killed while another 14 were wounded after a Russian drone strike on Ukraine's port city of Odessa. According to Odessa governor, 3 children were among the wounded in the overnight attack, with 1 in critical condition. Footage posted by the State Emergency Service show firefighters battling a blaze and rushing residents down a dark stairwell in a 21-story building hit by Russian drones. Now, separately, authorities in Ukraine's southern Kherson said One person was killed and 3 others were wounded in Russian strikes over the past day. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry released a video showing soldiers holding Russian flags in Chervona Zirka in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region. Now, the video follows an announcement by Russian defense forces that they had taken control of the Ukrainian settlement. Now, amid these developments, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky met outgoing Polish President Andrzej Duda in Kiev. During a press conference, Duda reiterated his support for Ukraine's accession to the EU and NATO. But he also said that he would not ratify Kiev's accession to NATO, arguing this could result in the alliance being drawn into a conflict with Russia.
For all these years, I've been on Ukraine's side. I am not only a supporter of Ukraine's accession to the European Union. Right after the Russian attack, I was the initiator of the letter to the head of the European Commission asking for Ukraine to be granted candidate status to the European Union as soon as possible. Today, I absolutely support Ukraine's admission to the European Union as soon as possible, but I am also a supporter of Ukraine's transatlantic presence.
Meanwhile, a recent YouGov poll suggests that Americans largely support sanctions against Russia. According to the poll, 63% of Americans support either the current level of sanctions against Russia or a higher level, while only 15% favor decreasing or eliminating sanctions. However, Americans seem more divided on the question of sanctioning buyers of Russian oil and gas. The YouGov poll suggests that almost half of Americans somewhat support sanctions against countries which buy Russian oil and gas, while 30% remain unsure about supporting such measures and 20% oppose somewhat or strongly oppose any secondary sanctions. Now, in a shocking political turn, New York's mayoral primary winner is facing calls for deportation. Democrat Zoran Mandani has come under fire from Republicans and conservative groups just days after his primary victory. Now, tense rhetoric has followed with GOP lawmakers accusing him of supporting terrorism, calling for his citizenship to be revoked, and even demanding deportation. Now, former border chief Tom Homan has warned that immigration enforcement will double down on sanctuary cities, saying, quote, and I'm quoting here, "Game on, we're coming." Now, Congressman Andy Ogles has written to the Attorney General claiming Mandani may have gained citizenship through willful misrepresentation, a charge that can trigger denaturalization under federal law. The attacks escalated after Donald Trump called Mandani 100% communist.
I can't believe that's happening. That's a terrible thing for our country, by the way. He's a communist. We're going to go to a communistic state. That's so bad for New York, but the rest of the country is revolting against it.
The New York Young Republican Club called on Trump to invoke a Cold War-era law, the Communist Control Act, to revoke Mandani's citizenship. The backlash is rooted in Mandani's political positions, his pro-Palestinian stance, his calls to abolish ICE, and a radical city agenda that includes rent freezes, free transit, and city-run grocery stores funded through massive tax on the rich. But despite the noise, the supporters say that his victory reflects a shift in New York's political landscape, a push for bolder left-wing policies. And moving on to some business news. In the coming week, U.S. jobs numbers are expected to hold up reasonably well. Still, lead indicators point to softer activity ahead, which could fuel expectations of an earlier rate cut. Now, in the Eurozone, markets will be watching unemployment and inflation data. Now, take a look at this next report for more.
Tariffs and trade talks will continue to make headlines as the deadline for Trump's import taxes pause comes closer. In a 4 July holiday-shortened week, Thursday is the key day for data. Financial markets are increasingly pricing in the prospect that the Federal Reserve will lower interest rates earlier. The bets are for the Fed to be more aggressive than previously thought if trade tensions continue to de-escalate. Previous bets were for around 0.5% of cuts in the second half, with 0.25% cuts favored in September and December. Now we are getting close to a 50% probability of a third, 0.25% cut before the year is out. Two Fed officials, Kevin Warsh and Michelle Bowman, are suggesting they could potentially vote for a rate cut in July, but most other officials are more conservative. They want to make sure that the price impact of tariffs is only a short-term phenomenon. However, the Fed has a dual mandate. They target inflation at 2%, but also are obliged to maximize employment. This week's jobs numbers are expected to hold up reasonably well, with around 100,000 jobs added. But lead indicators such as business employment surveys, job vacancy numbers, and rising jobless claims suggest that July through to September is a critical period that could see much softer data. On the other side of the Atlantic, price growth in the Eurozone has been very benign in recent months. This has prompted the European Central Bank to lower rates to 2%. Expectations are that inflation will continue to hover around 2% for the months ahead on the back of sluggish economic activity. For June, though, higher oil prices have translated into a slight tick-up in prices at the pump. The latest services inflation data from May were also disproportionately weak, so a slight increase seems to be in the making. Unemployment continues to trend at record lows for the moment, despite weakness in northern Eurozone labor markets. The South is picking up the slack with declining unemployment in Spain, Italy, Greece, and Portugal. Expect continued strong labor demand in the South to keep unemployment rates in the low 6% range. That is despite the softness in northern Eurozone markets. Business Bureau, WION, World is One.
Well, the most prestigious tennis Grand Slam is almost here, Wimbledon 2025. Now, Carlos Alcaraz will begin his bid for a third straight Wimbledon title when the tournament kicks off on Monday. The 22-year-old Spaniard comes into the event riding an 18-match winning streak, the longest of his career. He opens his campaign against 38-year-old Italian veteran Fabio Fognini. The big question is, can anyone stop him? Now, the world number 2 has defeated 24-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic in the last two men's finals on a center court. This year, however, a rematch can only happen in the final. Djokovic, seeded 6th, his lowest seeding at Wimbledon since 2018, begins his run against Frenchman Alexander Müller. The Serbian great is chasing a record-equaling 8th Wimbledon title. Alcaraz's real test could come in the quarterfinals and semifinals. He is projected to meet Holger Rune in the last 8 and could then face either 3rd seed Alexander Zverev or 5th seed Taylor Fritz for the place in the final. Now, a potential clash between Alcaraz and world number 1 Jannik Sinner is also possible only in the final. Sinner and Djokovic are drawn in the same half and can meet in the semifinals. Djokovic defeated the Italian in the Wimbledon quarterfinals in 2022 and the semifinals in 2023. But Sinner got the better of Djokovic in their most recent meeting, the French Open semifinals. Now, the Italian, however, lost to the Roland Garros final to Alcaraz in the epic 5-hour thriller, despite holding a 2-set lead and missing 3 championship points. Now, Sinner is now aiming to win his maiden Wimbledon title.
Okay, nice.
Hollywood actors Charlize Theron and Uma Thurman turned out for the premiere of the superhero sequel, The Old Guard 2. More about it in our next story. We leave you with this report. Do stay tuned. News and updates follow on the other side. That's all on World DNA. Thanks for watching.
But it was all based in like what she was trained in and I was trained in. It's all martial arts and sword fighting. Weapon fighting can really be kind of adjusted. So we worked together as much as we could.
She's a pro and she's amazing. I admire her very much. And working together is a thrill.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Well, I really loved how sharp the questions were. I think in very short span of time, I almost shared whatever I learned in so many years. So I think this is a platform where you can get really condensed learning in a very short span of time.
YO1 Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy.